Passage 4. Page 205. Questions 7 through 9. Listen to part of a lecture in an economics class.
Okay, so I want to address some questions some of you have been having with the presentation that you have to do. I've asked you to apply an economic theory to a present-day situation, and many of you have asked me for an example. So I thought I could save some time and just give one example to the whole class. I'm going to do that next, and then I'm going to outline the presentation in more detail. Now, I don't intend for this to be an example of the style of your presentation. Let me make that clear. I just want to give you an example of the sort of topic you might choose. You're still going to spend a little more time on expanding your explanations than I will in the example. Okay, let's take the most basic economic law of all, the law of supply and demand. This law states that if prices, supplies, and demand for goods are free to fluctuate up and down, an equilibrium, a balance, price will eventually be found where the amount of a good that is being produced, the supply, meets the amount of it that people are buying, or the demand. I'm going to talk about the implications of this law for the policy of price ceilings. Now, you could talk about price ceilings on food or fuel, which are imposed in different countries around the world. But since we have a particular example at work in this very city, and most of you are affected by it, the example I'm going to use is rent control. In this case, the maximum amount that rent can be raised on a yearly basis for existing tenants is fixed by the city government. Fixed at a specific percentage of the rent that is quite a bit lower than a landlord could charge for units without rent control. This is often an attempt at helping low-income and elderly people afford housing. So the amount that the price of rent can be raised each year is no longer flexible and is set below the point of equilibrium, below a much higher market price. That means that the regulated price of the rent for people who occupy a rent-controlled apartment for a period of time is less than the price a landlord can charge if new tenants move in. And by the way, new tenants who move into rental units that are not regulated, not controlled by rent control laws, are then making up for the loss of rent money on controlled units by having their rent levels increased by an excessive amount. Now, let's think about this logically. If the rents people are paying under rent control are lower than the price of unregulated rents, they are going to be a lot less willing to move and will hang on to their apartments for longer. I mean, think about it. If you are a tenant currently living in one of these rent-controlled places, you really don't want to let that sort of deal go, so you tend to keep living there. So, given this situation, then what happens to demand? Well, it means there are fewer apartments to rent and fewer that can be rented at a good price, so the demand increases. On the other hand, if you are a construction or investment company thinking about building residences in a city that has rent control, then you're going to look at the price ceiling and wonder whether it's worth it. Maybe the amount of money you would make from rent just doesn't justify building the units. So then, with people holding on to their rent-controlled apartments and houses, and fewer people willing to invest in building more, the result is a smaller supply of residences on the market. With demand increasing, you end up with what? Yes, a shortage. We'll discuss what a shortage means on the individual and systemic level in a minute, but now that you've got an example in mind, let me just go over the requirements for your presentation. Again, let me emphasize that what I just gave you was merely an example of a topic. It was not an example of exactly how you should give your presentations. Oh, those of you who are asking about this, does this example answer your question on what kind of topic I'm looking for? Okay, I see some nodding, so I'm going to assume that's enough to give most of you an idea of what I want. If you still have questions about it, you can ask later or during office hours. All right then. Now, I'm going to go over the presentations you'll be giving and what I'm looking for in them. Remember, these presentations are a quarter of your grade. 20% is for the actual presentation and 5% is for participation in the question and answer session. So please follow the instructions on the description of the assignment I passed out and, well, pay attention now. This is a course about economic theory. So for your presentation, I want you to choose one of the economic theories from the course and apply it to some present-day situation. This means that you need to include both the theory and the present-day situation and make it clear how the theory is applicable. And you'll need to include enough facts about the present-day situation to demonstrate that it provides a good example of the theory. Okay, now the timing. You have exactly 6 minutes to give your presentation. You'll be stopped at the end of 6 minutes, whether you're finished or not. Please, please, please give your presentation to yourself in the mirror and time it at least once to make sure that it fits into the time limit. I have to be strict about this because otherwise the presentations will take up extra class periods. So then, after you make your presentation, the other students will question you on your presentation. The question and answer period following the presentation will last for a maximum of 5 minutes, and the students in the audience are expected to be involved. Not after every single presentation. Be considerate of others. Turn-taking is evaluated, but I will be noting who asks questions, and I expect everyone to ask a few questions over the class periods you'll be doing this. Okay, are there any questions on that? No? Okay then, I'm actually going to use my example to transition into another topic. So, let's talk about what a shortage of housing stemming from rent controls means for the people who live in a city, and what policies might make more sense.